All right, what's up, guys? Corey here. I'm with the Long Island Lacrosse Journal. I'm with Hobart assistant coach Kyle Turri. How you doing today, my man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Corey.
Yeah, it's good to have you too. Crazy and uncertain times, and there's a lot going on. But one thing we can do during these times, which I really like, I get to connect with great coaches such as yourself, who maybe you might have been at this point coming off either a big win or a tough loss, and game planning for what's next. So it's really nice to get a chance to catch up with you. And I think it's really it's a good opportunity just for you to maybe tell your story a little bit to start, and talk a little bit about your experience coaching college lacrosse. So if you don't mind taking us back a little bit and just talk about what led you to being the assistant coach up at Hobart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first off, I appreciate you guys doing this. Growing up on Long Island, we didn't have there wasn't much like this. MSG varsity was just starting to come around, and there really wasn't a ton of media around high school lacrosse and lacrosse in general, even in a hotbed like Long Island. So it's really cool what you guys are doing with the playoff brackets and the scores, interviews. Certainly a fan of watching that throughout the season, and appreciate what you guys are doing. But
Thank you.
I grew up on Long Island, originally from West Islip. You and my brother got to know your family pretty well. You guys playing on the Empire team way back in the day. I think it was like '06 or '05.
Yep.
Dating
06.
ourselves a little bit there, but got to know you guys, and growing up, went and played at Duke for a couple of years, and then took my first coaching job as a volunteer out at Ohio State. Was lucky enough. Coach Myers had reached out and was curious if I'd go out there. So right out of graduation, packed up the car and moved out there, not really knowing a ton, but it was a great opportunity. It's something that I'd always wanted to do. My father being a coach at the high school level at West Islip for 30, 40 years now. Something I had always had my eyes on, and after some discussion with my coaching staff at Duke, Coach Danowski kind of pushed me towards it, and so I spent a year there and learned a ton. Obviously a great program, and Coach Myers has done a great job there. Coach Kester, Coach Ross there at the time, learned a ton from those guys. Really figured out what it meant to be a coach. I knew how the game worked. I felt pretty good about the X's and O's, but in terms of strategy and implementing that strategy and communicating that strategy, all things that are a little foreign to college student athlete, that's something that I really grasped on there, and kind of went from there. So had an opportunity for a year there, and made my way back a little closer to home at Binghamton for a year. Had the opportunity to coach your cousin Ryan, recruit Kevin for a little bit. But another great experience. It was a ton of fun. It was a lot of guys, that I knew of or knew well, just in terms of a lot of Long Island guys, a lot of New York guys. So Coach Kevin McCune gave me a great opportunity there, and really gave me a ton of freedom and a ton of responsibility in terms of, it only being my second year out of college, where I was able to have a lot of responsibility and learn on my own and learn on the fly. I had all these tools, from my prior experience, and just had an opportunity to be creative and start to implement them. So after a successful year there, went on to a little further upstate. I would consider myself a little bit of an upstater now, just moving a little more north. Coach Raymond gave me a great opportunity here, and have been at Hobart for 3 years now, and have loved every second of it. Have settled down a little bit, and really enjoying my experience here.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's what's I think really interesting about your story. Like, you went from playing and competing and winning I think more than one, right? You won 2 championships down at Duke.
Yep.
One as a starter, which is really cool. Like, incredible program, tons of history. Ohio State, maybe not as much of a history, but consider themselves in the same stratosphere as Duke, trying to get some of those incredible recruits. Recruiting the best of the best. Then to Binghamton, where it's a little bit of a different approach, where you guys are building up something there, and maybe recruiting more kids that are on the island, more New York State type kids, being a SUNY school, and now up at Hobart. I guess my question for you is, in such a short period of time, you've experienced four great programs, even though they're all very different. But from a recruiting standpoint, like, how do you kind of stay in the loop on like all the great players that are out there when, at the end of the day, each school you kind of been at, you're focused on maybe getting a different type of kid?
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be a different region, different club programs that certain schools have had ties with, and I think for the most part, it's been developing more relationships and just kind of increasing the amount of people that I know, specifically high school and club coaches in all different areas. I didn't have much of a footprint in the recruiting at Ohio State, being a volunteer assistant, and then being in a very specific region with, Binghamton being a state school and having a specific area, I had to branch out a little bit when I did get to Hobart and started to meet some people that the staff had already known well, and kind of do it a little bit on my own and just introduce myself, get to know more people. And that's how you start to see more kids and hear about more kids from, these non-hotbed areas where, you can look online at the New York, brackets and statistics and have a good idea of every kid, but it's a little bit more to that, and learning more kids throughout the process.
When you talk to maybe a club coach or a high school coach that you've built a relationship with, what are some of the questions that you ask about their kids when you have those conversations?
Well, I think the first thing is what is he like as a person? That I think that's kind of door number one. If it's not a good evaluation from there, the talent really doesn't matter. So that's the biggest thing, is finding out if he's going to fit into the culture that we're trying to build, and finding the right people, in every sense. So that's probably number one. And then number two is just kind of figuring out how he translates at the next level. We have so many different areas of seeing recruits, whether it's highlight tapes or seeing maybe a half of a game on a hot summer day in July, late in the year, when somebody's been playing lacrosse for 2 months. So really figuring out what those valued opinions are of those kids, and I think that's the biggest thing is, we have a relationship, and I have a relationship with other club coaches that will, tell me honestly, if somebody didn't show well one day, like, you got to give it another shot. He's a great player. He does have some good athleticism. He had a rough day, so we're not going to base it off of seeing one day. We're going to trust these opinions of, some of these guys who have seen these kids for a while, and say, I really think he has it. I think he's a Division I lacrosse player. I think he can do well in your program.
Sure. So, in your experience so far, you've seen some really nice success on the defensive side of the ball, especially with your man down units. Would you talk a little bit about like your style defensively, what you look for maybe individually in defensemen, how you develop defensemen, throughout the year, some intangibles that maybe some of your defensemen possess that allow you to be successful, and how you kind of are able to put all the pieces together and allow your defenses, whether you're man down or you guys are even, to work together to just be successful on the field.
Yeah, I think that we're looking for a ton of different things defensively. We want guys that can cover really well. We want guys who can communicate off ball really well. We want guys that can pick the ball up off the ground and handle it in transition. We play a really fast brand of lacrosse where our poles have complete freedom to go run and play on offense. So I think we find all three of those things. That's a home run, and that's the complete package. But I wouldn't say that every single guy that we recruit has to fit into that mold. We're just going to develop the others. So we're looking for guys that can learn how to play off-ball defense and who can communicate how to play that way.
Mm-hmm.
We want guys who can cover the ball, but if guys don't have the feet, we want to put them in positions and areas where here's how you can be successful on the ball. Get him to this spot, and we're going to be able to support you. Or we'll put a guy on a certain matchup where he can make more sliding decisions. He can communicate our off ball. But I think overall, as our defense, our 6v6 in the box defense, we're trying to play really fast, and we want to give guys freedom in decision making. We never want to handcuff a guy and say, no, you can't do that. Right? We want to give them some risks and some rewards to every decision they make. So if somebody makes a play in our practice or in a game, we can circle back and say, all right, so that didn't work out. If you try it this way, maybe this will work next time. But we don't want to tell guys that you can't do this or you can't do that. We want to give some freedom to go double team the ball. We want to give some freedom to go press out on the perimeter, as long as you're not creating offense. So I would say those two words or phrases, playing fast and having some freedom, are huge for our defense. We obviously have some structure and some strict rules that we want to adhere to, but we don't want to limit guys to, all right, you're a cover defenseman, or you're only going to be sliding in this scenario, right? We have this option, and this option. And I would say that our man down is a little bit different and kind of the opposite, where we don't press out as much. We don't get out and go crazy on the perimeter. I would say the two biggest things for our man down is playing more than one guy, which I think every great man down coach or defensive coach will say that, a great defenseman is going to play two guys. He can't just play one. And that just creates some indecision and some decision making where things may look open, but they really aren't, and trying to occupy as much space as possible. But I think one of the biggest things that our man downs have had success, over the years are just creating indecision for shooters. I think a 15-yard shot where a guy can bear down and he knows he's letting the ball go that's going to be a more successful shot. But if he catches the ball and then has a little bit of a question mark if he really does want to shoot it, now we've potentially infiltrated his hands, or he's not stepping in a little off balance where he's not getting as full of a shot off as he can.
Yeah, that's interesting. And some of your guys of late have shown some serious success. Michael Christensen, you got Stanny Gilbertson. Those are both guys that were, I think, first team all conference players last year. Why did those guys kind of stand out amongst the rest, within your defense, or guys that contributed, on the defensive side of the ball last year?
I think Stanny was an unbelievable athlete, and a huge competitor. He just wanted to go out and challenge every matchup that he could. And he was one of those guys where, he had freedom to go out on the perimeter and play as fast as he wanted, because he was the fastest guy on the field, where in every game that we played, we felt both teams, he was one of the most athletic guys on the field. So we gave him a ton of freedom to be that athletic and to play fast, in his one-on-one matchups. And I think the thing with Stanny was that when the ball was on the ground, that's where you really started to see, how effective he could be, whether it was picking it up or how fast he can get into the offensive end. He was a midfielder that played more defense than offense. And I think he ended up with somewhere like 10 to 15 points. He was just a nightmare going from end to end. So yeah, he had a lot of success in our system and how fast we wanted to play. And I think Mike Christensen is he's great just in the sense that he can cover a ton of one-on-one matchups and be successful, but he doesn't just want to be a cover defenseman. He wants to be involved in our off ball. He wants to look for some plays that he can make, whether it's supporting the ball or playing on the backside. He really wants to be the complete defenseman. And I think his competitiveness in that makes him just sets him apart from other guys, just because if you watch him in our 6v6, in our defense, he just takes goals so personally. If we get scored on, probably more than any goalie does, he just gets he just doesn't want the team to score so badly. And I think that tenacity and the competitive drive that he has is something that every defensive coach wants.
Let's talk a little about the direction that the program's going, at least since you've been there. Last year, just talked about individually some of your success. You guys have shown success as a team as well. Where were you guys kind of at this year before things got canceled with the season?
I thought we were in a great spot. I think going into the spring, we knew where we had experience from last year. Probably in the goal, in the offensive end, in the defensive end, we were really inexperienced moving in terms of guys that played in between the lines, guys that played both sides of the ball. Our midfielders, and we don't even use the term midfield. Guys that play two ways for us are gonna play two ways. They're gonna play defense. They're gonna play offense. We don't have offensive midfielders. We don't have defensive midfielders. Certainly, some guys are gonna be subbed on. The defense side a little bit more, but you won't not find that guy playing an offensive possession.
Sure.
So I think in terms of structuring it the way we want and being able to play that fast, that just takes time to develop. Guys learning both sides. We have to split. If we're playing 20 minutes of, two half fields, guys have to split their time up, 10 minutes playing defense, 10 minutes playing offense. So it just takes a little bit longer to get that experience. And the first 4 or 5 games of the season, that's what was happening. Guys were freshmen, sophomores that hadn't played a ton of defense or hadn't played a ton of offense in the past, were starting to develop those experiences and making decisions in live play, in pressure situations, in the Carrier Dome versus Syracuse, at home on Boswell Field versus Binghamton.
Mm-hmm.
Guys were just put in those scenarios more. And I think I thought we were in a great spot. Obviously a huge bummer that, they can't get that extra experience the rest of the way, but we really felt like we were moving in a good direction. Just improving, learning from some failures week by week, and just not really backtracking.
Sure.
Continuing to take steps forward.
Sure. Now, we have a few minutes left here. I definitely, before we end our conversation, I want to talk about the history of Hobart lacrosse because, maybe some of the more current lacrosse recruits and the players of today's day and age may not realize how kind of like deep and rich the history of the program goes back. I'm just curious, from your perspective coming into the program, only been there, this is now your 3rd season. Does the staff kind of talk about it? Does the team, are they aware of it? Is the connection with some of the alumni, is that important part of the success of your program today? And can you just kind of touch on that?
Absolutely, Corey. I think our guys need to know what Hobart lacrosse stands for and need to know the tradition and the history of this program. One of the oldest going back to, the 1890s. I think our first game versus Cornell and some of the longest rivalries versus Cornell versus Syracuse go back to 1895, 1896. So it means a ton to upstate New York, some of those rivalries, and, just a program that exploded in the 70s, the 80s, the early 90s at the Division III level, winning 10 championships in a row, 12 champions. It's some insane numbers and just some incredible lacrosse players to come through the program. Current head coaches, Jeff Tambroni at Penn State, Coach both Van Arsdales at Loyola. There's been so much history in this program, and talking about guys that have won 4 national championships in a row and then go off into the world. And I think the biggest thing is the connection of our guys with those former players that have had such an incredible experience here. Our guys are constantly in touch with guys that have played lacrosse. There's constantly guys that are getting in touch with Coach Raymond, curious about guys that want to do internships or looking for a job here, and just because they know what the experience our guys are getting, they feel connected with our guys, and there's such a huge support for the program in all areas. You can definitely feel it from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no doubt. And my dad talks about it all the time, like his like go-to story as he talks about kids starting lacrosse, or parents thinking their kids are starting lacrosse too late if, let's say, they pick up a stick in like 9th grade, 10th grade. He just references some of the All-Americans that came out of Hobart who maybe were like football or baseball players, in their, let's say freshman year, sophomore year, and then
Yep.
coach puts a stick in his hand by his senior year, he's an All-American. And I believe Coach Fed at Bucknell was one of those guys as well, right? I think he was a big time like football, baseball player who.
Yeah, I think he came to play football, I believe, and then just kind of and picked it up there. But
Yeah.
there's so many stories like that. It's pretty cool to just experience and start to get to know these guys.
Yeah, no doubt. It's cool, and I think it's important, like you said, and it's great that you guys kind of you keep that bridge going, with the current program and staff, because not only it helps your kids when they graduate and go into the real world and want to figure out what they want to do, but just to have an appreciation for the rich history that just exists, and all the great players that have come through it. So, one way I always like to leave these conversations, which has been great, just learning about your coaching journey and Hobart Lacrosse, is just for the kids that are out there that maybe are going through the recruiting process. It's definitely some tough times, especially for that junior class when there's a lot of uncertainty and don't know what's next for them. What's maybe one thing that you can leave with them that might be constructive and positive for them to take away and use to help maybe their own situation?
Yeah, I think it certainly is a weird time, specifically for the 21, the 22 class. Just looking into the summer, I would say the best piece of advice I could give those guys is that you personally are not unique. There are every kid in the 21 class, the 22 class is going through the same thing as you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I think that's probably half of Division I schools, if not more, 2/3. Division I, Division II, Division III schools are still looking for 21 recruits. So they're still going to fill those classes. You're not going to get forgotten about. It's the process may just be delayed a little bit. Whether it's we get to play in June or it gets pushed to August, or the next time we see guys is October or November recruiting. The process is going to continue. It's really just what you do right now.
Mm-hmm.
You have an opportunity to set yourself apart and kind of take a look in the mirror, but also from a competitive aspect, just think about the guys that you're competing against in the summer and some of the opportunities that they're looking at. Can you work harder than them right now in the backyard or sneaking onto the high school field right now? I know most schools have taken cages off the field, but wherever it is, if it's in your basement, can you work harder than the next guy and set yourself up so that when this recruiting dead period does end, or when we are able to start going out and evaluating, what is your product going to look like? We always talk about recruiting in terms of kind of the times of the year. And I'll tell you, college coaches love June recruiting and they don't love November recruiting, and the weather being one factor, but the other big one is just being guys coming fresh off of their high school seasons, having a stick in their hand for a couple months and the product looks really good. And then July guys get burnt out a little bit with a lot of events, but what is it going to look like when we first say, okay, now we're allowed to go play, now we're allowed to go evaluate you guys, what is your product going to look like? So I think that's the biggest thing, throughout this whole dead period, throughout this weird time that we're in.
No doubt. Well, Coach Turri, really appreciate your time, man, and we wish you and Hobart the best of luck here moving forward through this.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey.